we're going to take the time to review our predictions for 2025 in AI and see how well we did live before all of you. So let's go ahead and share screen on it. We asked ChatGPT to analyze the transcript. We also looked over it in the video and give us an assessment of it. So we're going to share it and we'll go over it and see how well we did. And then we have a surprise for this year doing something a little different.
That's right.
Okay, Justin, I'll let you lead going through this. Clear summary of it.
All right, and we did this in December of 24, right before the turn of the year. First one we had was public tension and backlash around AI. We did see some of this. We saw people starting to talk about deepfakes. They were more concerned about deepfakes. It started out with some of the VO2 and whatnot. It was kind of funny at first until people really started making it practical, and it made some people nervous. And then we started hearing discussions this fall about, well, how are deepfakes and AI going to affect the midterm elections? And so that was pretty good. And I think we did actually talk about elections, and deepfakes were probably the main two that we spoke about,
Yeah.
and voice cloning. And I think we did pretty good on that one.
Now, I want to tell you something I think we didn't quite hit as well. I think we thought there'd actually be more visual protest, but I think there was so
Mm.
much other turmoil in the world that took the lead on that.
You're right on that one.
All right, number two.
All right, job displacement accelerates, especially unevenly. Yes, we did see this. And we were talking about more, I think, the direct job displacement as far as AI directly displacing people with nothing else added to it. I know we did talk about freezing hiring, which I'll touch on that in a minute. And we saw this. Accenture, some of the other companies, I want to say there were one or two companies that hit it hard and really regretted it first quarter. And I'm glad to see a lot of companies watched their kind of flaming experiment happen and pulled back a little bit. We did see some companies that really, I want to celebrate them. There's a number of them out there where they really did a job freeze and looked and said, without laying off any of our people, how can we augment our workforce and make them more productive? Which I applaud them every day. And I think what I've seen with some of those companies is once they got their arms around AI, how it could work within what they had, I actually think some of them went on to even hire more people, and which really allowed some people, I think, that maybe got displaced by AI to be able to have some additional opportunities. We did see this in higher education with some of the universities that failed to prepare graduates, even in some of your more prestigious schools for AI. They actually saw a drop in the hiring rate for those students compared to previous years. So that was kind of a displacement with AI. They weren't really as prepared as other candidates going in. Really, I think we did pretty good on that one. I think
Up,
we were a little more general. What do you think, Martin?
I think one of the things that I'm suspicious of, but we didn't have all the data, is a lot of people might have used they layoffs as an excuse, blaming AI too,
Right.
to try to
Yeah.
make their numbers look better. And this isn't something we talked about as much. A lot of change occurred. So I think we're on it. And again, this gets back to our fundamental. The best thing for your career is understand the ethical and appropriate uses of AI, which is what we do a lot of training on. Hiring frustration. Boy, did this. I'm sorry. We should have spent more time on this.
I think we knocked this one out of the
I
park,
know.
really.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
if you want to read more about it, we do have Job Hunting in the AI Era, which kind of came out of this prediction. We saw this coming, and especially when you're talking about job disruptions, we work a lot with hiring and preparing people for workforce, and so we already saw where some of the AI screens were coming and how companies were going to use that to really try to screen people and reduce the workload that they had to bring people in. This has kind of backfired. The horror stories that we've heard this year from candidates who were just locked in 100, 200 applications, and it's all getting screened out. They're not really getting seen. I know we worked with an organization that had a closing, and we were able to work with, anybody out of their workforce. We offered, look, no cost, come to us. We're going to help you. We care about the costs, and we're going to help you, reskill. So that way you can learn how to navigate, this new workforce that's popping up, and hopefully, not dive straight into the AI pool of hiring, but remember that networking still holds a great deal of power in this, and that eventually led into the development of the job hunting in the AI era with you, myself, Dana Gower, John O'Connor. So I think we hit that one out of the park. And that book has been one that whenever I give it to somebody or someone's purchased it and gives me feedback, they found it incredibly insightful and very beneficial for understanding, how this is going to accelerate as we really get into more HR based AI models.
Yeah, this has been dead on, and we, yes, we knocked it out of the park with the book. And like you mentioned before, we helped my university that closed down, St. Andrews, and I got, thanks to you and the rest of the team, volunteer to help them at multiple levels, and that led to a book. And I'm really proud of that book. The other thing is, I was just thinking of one student I know, really a great student, had gotten it, lost the job, and they were like applying, and talked to me. And I said, you need to open the book you bought and do it, because, people are scared when this happens. And they opened the book, they applied it. I have to say, they have an interview this week. So this is it. I heard from managers that say, I'm done taking this stuff through these systems because all I'm getting is data that doesn't match the human being, going back to more direct referrals. There's someone I know directly, upper management in technology, doing just
Mhm.
that. This is something where we're not only predicted it, we created a real solid solution this year. That's one of the things I'm most proud of. Number four.
I think I'll do 4 and 5 together in a
Good.
way, because we did say a rapid growth of robotics. I want to say that when we were doing this originally, I know that Tesla and a few other companies had started to develop some humanoid robotics, and they were still kind of clunky. I think at the time, Boston Dynamics, companies, organizations like that were still in the lead there. This is something that has really taken off, and I'd say summer, fall, because now we see, I want to say when you're looking, there's probably about 35 companies globally that do humanoid robots. We've seen some places. I want to mention one specific, Kyber Labs, that are doing some really phenomenal work on tactile. They have a hand that has, kind of the same tactile as a human hand with the skin. And they have demonstrations where it can pick up intricate pieces like a small nut to put on a bolt. But what's fascinating is it has the same texture. They can grab things like we can, but they can actually make movements of, I think, 20 times faster. And so it's really amazing what you're seeing now. And that's just a hand. And so when you're putting things like that on the humanoid robots, that's really awesome. Now we have seen on the Uncanny Valley where, yes, they have made them really small, almost comically small, to where, they're not intimidating, or they've designed them in a way to where they're obviously a robot. And at the same time, we have seen reactions. I know a lot of the uh, conferences in, say, China, who really boast the biggest, uh, most advanced robotics right now. We have seen where they've designed some incredibly realistic looking robots, to where I've seen videos of participants, or people who have attended these conferences. They are actually uncomfortable with how realistic they are. And so those are robots that are still based on an algorithm. They're not really AI. They don't have a language model per se, but they still have kind of your generic prepared responses to things. And you can see some people are very fascinated, but some people, I think the general public, are really unnerved by those. So I think we really approach that really well. I think 2026, I think you've had a year of people exposed to that. I almost think 2026 might. I don't want to get into predictions yet, but we might see more of that. And I think we may start seeing the general public start to get desensitized to it. So I don't know how the uncanny valley is going to be, but I think we were spot on. I think there's still a level of discomfort there with how realistic even some of these voice models, kind of your conversational models are getting.
I think the large companies saw our video and adapted.
That's
and
right.
and that's and to tell people watching this, just notice how they don't have real faces on them. And
Mhm.
that's where this uncanny valley issue comes from. In fact, I wrote that article, I think, several years ago, that this is something we need to look at. And I'm going to let people research it for themselves following this video. But I think they definitely got that to make sure they know that it's a robot. It's like we don't mind something automated, but we do mind being fooled by it where we don't know in advance. And I think they've taken that to heart in that. Okay, breakthroughs, pretty amazing stuff in
Mhm.
science, especially some of the Google work, the area that's occurring. This is incredible that's coming.
Right.
Very exciting. And I think I almost jumped ahead. Well, let's stay on target. How we did with this.
I think we were probably a little more conservative on this one. I wouldn't say we were off because we did see what was it, uh, Nobel Prizes in AI and biology. I'm not an expert on it, but we have seen a great deal of developments. I don't think this is necessarily an area where the general public really focuses in on medical breakthroughs, but we have seen with treatments, with things like AlphaFold, what DeepMind's doing, and then even looking at quantum computing and how they're plan on using the power behind that to really look at new medicines. I can't remember how many new medicines have been created just this year alone, but we
Right.
are seeing a great deal of breakthroughs. I think one of the most impressive breakthroughs I've seen this year is just how they're using AI with, MRI, X-ray, and really training it on identifying, saying, cancer tumors many times faster than what we're capable of doing. And I know that there's a few studies this year that came out that just showed, I believe one was with tumors in the brain where it could spot it at, I want to say it was about the sixth of the size of what a normal doctor would spot it at, what you're trained at. And so they were able to identify tumors at a much earlier state that really was allowed for much more minimally invasive surgery. That's incredibly impressive there. And that could be something that could have been a decade of medical innovation in just a year. Again, I'm not an expert on that, but that seems to be kind of the timeline I think of when I look back at this year versus, the 2000s even.
Yeah, I think this is one where we underpredicted. We saw it
Hmm.
coming, but I think it exploded more. I'm always suspicious in the quantum computing because it has so much potential from government security on verifying how much they've actually advanced it. So that's one where a lot of claims occurred, but I got to tell you, just I'm always suspicious on it because, of course, whoever really breaks this could
Hmm.
have kind of like a master pass key to a lot of the world. So there's a
Oh
big
yeah.
government push behind it. And those things sometimes are overhyped to be able to attract more funding. So we're watching it, but I'm much more certain about the breakthroughs in medical. And I think they outperformed what we said.
Hmm.
Now, number seven.
And the segue from 6 to 7 on your
Yep.
point, when you take quantum computing and say genetic modification or bioengineering, for example, not to go to a dark angle, but when you look at, biothreats, things like that, if you can imagine, just what we know science is capable of now, you take something like a certain organization purchasing, genetic like 23andMe, and then they apply that genetic code into something like a quantum computer. you have no clue what could be developed from there. So like you said, whoever owns that, it's going to make it's almost to a degree almost more powerful than AGI because then you can kind of biohack the genetic code. And when you're looking at human augmentation, I know, we had Elon Musk's neural chip. We've seen that growing. I don't think it went as fast as most people thought, but I know we talked about prosthetics. One thing that I'm really interested in, just personally, is exoskeletons. We just saw over the Christmas break, so I'm gonna give it 2025. We just saw over Christmas break. You have, I want to say it was a Japanese-based company. Don't quote me on that. But now we have a prosthetic for paraplegics to where it will actually come to you. And if you're sitting in a wheelchair, it'll walk to you. You can set it to where it knows the height and the dimensions of the body to where it will come, it'll adjust, you can strap it on, and then you're able to walk. And so now you don't really have to worry so much about getting to your walking aid. It comes to you and it adjusts to you. And so that's some advancements that we're seeing there. And prosthetics, again, we're getting to a point where prosthetics and robotics are not separate anymore. I think we're seeing a blending of the prosthetic industry with something like Kyber Labs I was talking about earlier, where we saw some of that 2023, 2024, where these prosthetics are strong enough to be able to lift heavy materials, but our biological frame isn't as strong enough to support the weight. Now, when you're looking at prosthetics and then things like the exoskeletons, we're really starting to get into some sci-fi level augmentation here, which is phenomenal because with the right augmentation we're seeing things where people are gaining back eyesight, they're gaining back the ability to hear. Now we have the ability to start using potentially limbs again that we thought were not able to use, prosthetics, things like that. I almost feel like we're starting to see AI and robotics and kind of bio augmentation in a way start to kind of Venn diagram in a way into each other. And so that we did talk about that. And that was one of the ones I went out on a limb myself and was hopeful for. And I think we did pretty well on that
Now,
one.
one of the things to me went into the creepy area we didn't mention is
Hmm.
those little T cell generated micro brains that they're
Yeah.
hooking up.
We did see that take a next step. I can't remember what they called it, but they now do have bioorganic robots. It's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. It's like it makes me think of The Thing
Yeah.
from but it almost looks like they have a blob of spam and they start putting chicken wings on it and it connects and the arm starts twitching as soon as it connects to the mass, and it's incredibly gross to look
Mhm.
at and it's unnerving. I mean, I don't typically get unsettled, but the first time I saw that video, it was fascinating, but I was unsettled. And it's just it's thinking like we're growing brains in labs, we're growing organic robots. I don't know. So yeah, we did talk about some of the potentially creepy stuff, and I don't think we went far enough on that one.
Yeah, but I was talking about the ones that the real small ones connected in a
Yeah.
computer system, not the
Yes.
big, but they're both in the same family. Even
Mm-hmm.
but that's fascinating. Now that's going to really take a while to develop, but of course that's huge ethicals because they're showing low level brain waves in these things. So
Yeah.
not higher brain waves, but low
Mm-hmm.
level augmented reality and metaverse. I got to tell you, I really didn't think it would die off as fast or be put on hold as fast. I think it's just all the resources need to compete in AIs force these companies to say this might be useful if we develop it, but we got to work over here now. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's kind of on the back burner at this point. I don't think, especially Zuckerberg's given up on it because that was such a passion of his. But I don't. think that it's going to be what they thought it was. I will say it was really fun earlier in 2025 seeing Apple come out with Oculus and what you could do, with augmented reality. I know with the work that I've been doing in the trades, that's something that really appeals to me because, I could give a technician something like that and they could, work on an engine or work on something and they can see where to go from there and be able to come back and kind of work on things as they see it. It's going to make things a lot easier, training a lot easier. And so I think a lot of what we're going to see in the augmented reality is through visual. And it's going to be Zuckerberg's even working on this to where it's not so much a metaverse, but it's augmenting current reality and how we can use it as a tool to really enhance what we're already doing.
Absolutely. Let's talk about coding next.
I think we did really good on this one because obviously the way 2025 wrapped up. I heard a story the other day of a company where their more advanced developers are phenomenal at coding and building systems, but the CEO of a company recently said they walked past an office of one of their chief developers and they weren't even coding, they were running 4 or 5 coding agents. And he had people that worked in sales or product management that were actually starting to build and develop apps that never really originated in those departments before. And then other developers would step in and fine tune them. And so the comment was, what do we do about the job description now? Because whereas used to it was, well, you had to be from this department or you had to have this skill in order to build. Now you have things like 11 Labs, like Claude, and even some of these other specialty programs to where you can really just almost speak to it in a traditional prompt and have it build. I know I've seen firsthand friends of mine that are building these amazing websites that are actually interactive tools through Claude. And they have no coding experience. They don't even have a computer science background, but they've really taken the time to learn how to use these tools and learn them safely. They even use it to check back and explain where any potential safety risks may be and how to fix it. And they're doing this with Claude and GitHub and BigQuery kind of SQL databases. And obviously I'm not really versed in that. I know enough, and that's one thing I want to learn more about this year. But these are individuals who did not come from that world, and they're building these fantastic products just from really a basic understanding and have it teach them. So that's massive compared to where we were in 2024.
Yes. And then the negative of that is just more and more
Hmm.
crap code that's out there
Yeah,
for
AI
people.
slop.
Yeah, and this is something I think we brought up right at the beginning when vibe coding started is
Hmm.
it needs to be done by someone who understands its limitations and knows if it's good or bad code or if it's doing a function call that it shouldn't go to another country. This is another one. Growth in AI agents and agentic. I think it's growing, and the ones that are breaking it down into smaller pieces that
Hmm.
include supervision. And the prediction it would be a turning point in AI agents. I don't know. I think we might have over predicted that this would come faster, but we're aware of the complexity problem with it.
I think a lot of people over predicted where this would be this year. I think a lot of people by this time thought that we would be running companies from agents. I know Claude did their fun activity where they had it run I think it was a cafe and it did
Right.
pretty well, but then they had it run something else and it was disastrous, the context of it. And we hit it real hard. I know we've seen these articles in the fall, Microsoft, different areas where people aren't using it like they should. I think Google's done really good with it. They went a different route. They've gone more of an educational route. I know I did an applied credential with Microsoft on building an agent with Copilot Studio, and you do have to know a bit of the technical background with Microsoft anyway. It was not as simple as I thought it would be. I learned a lot from it, and it really helped me learn a lot about the intricate nature of Microsoft and the operating system and 365 without going any deeper on that. Google is, I think it's 80K. They're still they do a lot. There's still a lot of coding in that one, but they're pretty powerful and pretty cool. I know Zapier is one that I've taught this year, and Zapier
Yep.
is
Yeah,
really
we had a good
good.
class with that one.
Yep. And but it really does excel. I think what a lot of people missed out on is being able to turn it over to an agent, where agents really do thrive with guidance, and you still have
Mhm.
to have that human in the loop. And so I still think we're, I don't know, I'd almost say maybe 2 years away from, and that's being very generous. I don't think we're going to see 2026 where you're just going to be able to turn everything over to an agent and it works. I think we're still going to, the big thing it comes down to as well is it's not really so much the agent's fault as much as we've got to build a hierarchy of multiple agents, that hence the systems. But for them to work, people have to have their data clean and organized. And that's a lot of times where you see a lot of this fall apart is when you look at people's data, it's not organized, it's not, or it's not really titled or organized right, and it really makes it messy and hard to build an effective agent off of bad data.
Has really grown quite a bit. It's not a complete takeover, but the text to video, I mean, from more and
Hmm.
more people are learning about it, more are developing it. In fact, we're rolling out a course on it this year. We weren't ready for, especially for small businesses, to do it because it really took quite a bit of work and prompts to get
Hmm.
something, but the fundamentals are definitely important to learn. And so I think we were correct on that, advancing steadily and going to continue advance. We list a number of tools that are now becoming more affordable if
Hmm.
you need that.
Right. And I think the biggest, not so much as being able to create long form, amazing videos, but pretty impressive videos for the average user. I do think Sora 2 took the cake. VO is really impressive. Most people don't really use Google Flow or have had a ton of ease in creating, with VO3, you still have to know the intricacies of that. But I will say Sora 2 has definitely made its impression, and I think them organizing it as kind of a social media app was a smart idea to where you get in, you create what you want, you share it, people can repost it, like it. That definitely drove a lot of people to it. And I've been pretty impressed with how realistic you can get some of those videos. I've fooled people that have known me for 20 years, asking when I filmed this stuff. I never did. And so I think we did a good job on that one personally, because there are a lot of apps out there that make it accessible with just very short prompts.
And
I
what we
didn't.
learned from some of the good and bad commercials is that the companies need to know, are they paying their old marketing department that's claiming they can do it but not really skilled on it, or are they going to the people who are really producing quality content at a competitive price? And I think we won't call out names, but there are a few train wrecks for Christmas AI where I think they just went to their old marketing department and they said, "Can you do this?" And they said yes, and then found out they really might not have had the skills to do it. So people need to be smarter when they're investing money in this.
Hmm.
Okay, open source versus regulation. I think this is something we're dead on, is something that needs to continue to be watched. We want a strong open source community, but we also have to realize that criminals will use it as well. But then we found, of course, with Claude, a very strong criminal activity used it for some vibe coding and did some
Hmm.
were able to hack into things. So I'm still a pretty big advocate of, we want the open source so people can learn it, And the Chinese provided a lot of open source that I wish I want to see more of a balance on. So, what's your view of how we called this one?
I think we did pretty well. I know we saw in the EU they cracked down on a few things. I know we saw Apple threaten to pull a business because of overregulation. I think Meta was another one, which I think they're going through another rename again. They've named themselves about once every year. And so I think they pulled out some of their business. Of course, we saw the White House get involved with official regulation. That's still occurring. I think now they're talking about developing a framework that, everybody will at least have to operate under that framework potentially. I'm not sure how that's going to go. I think they're still going to give kind of each individual state or Department of Education, whatnot, leeway. Department of Education's actually been pretty supportive. They have released some pretty solid guidance on how to use AI and whatnot, not really regulation. So I think we're seeing a lot of guidance come out, but I do think 2026 we might see some actual regulation come out, especially since I think some of these companies want to be regulated to a degree. I could see it go either way. Open source is definitely something that flourished this year. We've seen a lot of open source models. We're starting to see actually now to where something that's gaining ground is small models versus large language models
Mm-hmm.
and access to small models you can run locally that are pretty powerful. I think we're starting to see with some of the products NVIDIA's coming out with that allows you to kind of run a home lab or a home model at the same power as a large language model, but for a much cheaper price. I think that might be something we see more of in 2026 on the open source. I know Hugging Face, which is, like the GitHub for AI, Hugging Face has, grown in popularity. GitHub is still very involved in, open source and being able to look at what other people are building. I think we're going to continue to see that. And I'm not sure how, open source versus regulation is going to look. I would imagine that any regulation would have to make room for open source, or they're going to probably receive a great deal of pushback.
Yeah, I think America's winning over Europe right now in this.
Hmm.
And I think we predicted that. So that's important where they have to understand if you overregulate, then you're going to kill development and money
Hmm.
and investors, which is in our main training course, AI for Professionals. We go into the history of how AI went into two winners basically because the funding dried up. And when
Hmm.
funding dries up and people can't benefit from it, then you have a big problem. So
Right.
I think that's it. Okay, ChatGPT's vote. We're going right to the vote of us,
Hmm.
and we discussed it before we saw it. Uneven job displacement. Yep, we're dead on with that. Hiring frustration. Yes, robotic design. Avoiding uncanny valley. The AI driven biology. I think we knocked some of that out of the park. Augmented reality, and I think it's slipping into more appropriate, don't you?
Hmm.
Natural language for coding, that's advancing both good and bad. AI agents becoming practical, but not at the rate we thought. So that's, I want to make sure we own our being off. Okay. Text to video, much more accessible to the average person. That's why we're rolling out a class this year on it. Open source versus regulation tension, that's still there and important. Directionally correct, but early. Okay. That's what we talked about, right? Mass public protests. I predicted a little more, but I think, Justin, we didn't anticipate as much global political upheaval that kind of outshrouded it, don't you?
Right. I agree.
The consumer robots really need to come a little bit further to be at the home level. Widespread neural interface adoption, huge advancements, but not widespread. Okay. And where we were conservative, dead on, the agents, that's what we talked about. The speed of text to video improvement, though it really did significantly improve, we thought it might move even faster. And
Cultural normalization of conversational AI.
yeah, I think one of the big things is businesses push too hard to try to get rid of people and throw money at AI instead of going, what is our process currently and how do we implement it? So we got, I would say, I'd give us I'll let you give a grade and then I'll give mine.
I'd say, I mean, we did roughly 8 out of 10, pretty dead on. And I think we were conservative on a number. I don't think we were too far off on some of them, but we kind of held back. So I think we did pretty good compared to what I've seen a lot of people
Yep.
who have predicted. I think we did pretty good.
I give us a B plus A minus. How's that? Does that seem
I'll
fair?
take that. Yeah,
That's
we'll
pretty
put that in
darn
the grade
good,
book.
man, in this world. Justin, tell them what we're going to do in the next video because we're going to do something different this year. So stay tuned to see that.
So I think in the next video we're not going to so much as do predictions because things are just moving so fast and so wild, so unpredictable that I think we're going to look more at, based on what we're seeing over the last year, what we're already seeing in 2026, and what we're hearing from clients, organizations, and small businesses, is we're going to frame it more so of what do you need to be looking at this year? What do you really need to focus if you're going to reskill or upskill in 2026 with AI and the emerging technologies? Where do you really need to focus your efforts on to really get the most out of it and not just get caught in this loop of what the hype is this month?
Yes, absolutely. Stay tuned and let's hear your comments as well. This is another exciting year, and we have a mission for North Carolina of the effective, ethical, and profitable use of AI, and we're marching forward at many different levels. So if you're interested in being part of it, joining us, or collaborating, co-opetition, we're an advocate of that, working together. And we want NC to be the leader in the effective, ethical, and profitable use at all levels in AI.